The end of the age, I'm afraid I feel is right upon us.
What you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call that mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. Like, what you know about rolling down in the deep? When your brain goes numb, you can call that mental freeze. When these people talk too much, put that shit in slow motion. Yeah, I feel like an astronaut in the ocean. You say that I'm cool. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Objects in the sky.
Don't believe in T-H-O-T. Shit, keep playing me dumb.
Don't know exactly what they are.
Don't really know my mental. Let me give you the picture like stencil. Falling out in a drought. No rain, but I'm pouring down. See, that pain was all around. See, my mode was kinda lounge. Didn't know which way to turn. Flow was cool, but I still felt burned. Energy up, you gon' feel my surge. I'ma kill everything like this purge. Let's just get this straight for a second. I'ma work, even if I don't get paid for progression. I'ma get it.
Do exactly as I say, and you will not know.
Even moving like kinetic. Put this shit in a frame. Better know I don't blame everything that I say. Man, I seen you deflate. Let me elevate this in a frame. Have you walking on a plane?
Hey guys, you're watching No Way Jose. You can find this on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major audio podcatchers, and Rumble as well, and Odyssey. I just haven't been mentioning them as much recently. Feels like it's kind of dead, but whatever. If you like Odyssey, do that as well too. Today, no guest. I'm going solo. Do want to give a little apology to my patrons and I guess the public as well. I've been kind of slacking this week with my normal schedule, dropping these because just been a little bit under the weather. And then between the holidays and stuff, just kind of hard to get one in. Like I said, I'm doing a solo episode. The topic today is doing like Fed infiltration to the alien UFO world. This is basically a little disclaimer. This is basically just straight up coming right out of this sucker right here. Aberration in the Heartland of the Real. I just finally got around to finishing that, end notes and all. The disclaimer is I'm not some expert at all, just is coming from this, but anyone who's read the end notes portion of Aberration knows it's pretty damn thorough. So whatever, if you guys have disagreements or whatever with any of the things I say, you guys can definitely put stuff in the comments, but just want to make sure I'm not trying to bamboozle you guys and think I'm some sort of expert. I've run a ton of books or anything. This is really probably the only book I've really read where it went this in depth into this specific thing, which I mean, it really speaks to how great this book is. It really is a really dope book. A lot of different stuff. And as I went through it, as I was reading it, there were multiple times I was like, geez, here's totally a podcast right here. Yeah, definitely got to talk about this. And this was one of them. This was the first one. I have a few other ones. I think the next one will probably be Bangirter, the Johnny Bangirter, his story. I don't even know if that's the right way to pronounce it. His is pretty interesting. But this one right here will probably be a two-parter. I thought I'd get it done in one, but as I was digging through this to kind of take notes, geez, this thing is dense. So there is a lot in this. So this will be probably a two-parter. This one will be kind of going more the background, maybe the earlier timeline stuff. And the next one will kind of go into the 50s, so modern day type stuff. Then also individual examples of kind of what I'm getting at. I do want to give credit for that intro. That's from my buddy. He's actually one of my sponsors. That's at Jolly on Klebold. And I do want to remind people how this works. For my patrons, you guys usually get this roughly about a week later. This one will probably be a little bit earlier because, like I said, a little less than a week because my schedule's a little jacked up with being sick and all. But how this works, like I said, early for my patrons, they get the live stream. The lowest level for that, if you just want the early stuff, is $2. But there's a bunch of different levels, the highest being the sponsor level, and I read those guys off every episode. I have my co-host on Tower Gang, Toad, at Tower Gang Toad. I also have at Abrogate D's, then Kevin B. Clark, who's a full-time guitarist and private music teacher in the New York area. So if you're looking for that, hit him up. And if you want to get in contact with him, you can hit me up. Then at ZOVERACK, then at _Infinite Zeal, then Jacob Daniel of the Biblical Anarchy podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Biblical Anarchy. I just went on his show recently. I think it's going to be about a little less than a month before that comes out. And as I also mentioned, my buddy Tim Tuttle, with the handle at Jolly on Klebold. Definitely go and follow if you like those intros that I use so frequently. Definitely go hit him up. Also, do remind you guys, TopLobsta.com, use Jose at checkout for 10% off. If you want to get my merch, other show merch, other stuff that's not show related, that's merch, go get that stuff. But like I said, this is I'm kind of covering the Fed infiltration of UFO stuff. And I guess I had a one of my patrons asked a question, which is one of the that's the $5 level, and sometimes depending on what I'm doing, I'll open it for the $2 level as well. Allow them to ask questions for these. And he said, "This is my buddy Tim Tully." He said, "I'm sure Richard Doty and Paul Benowitz will be brought up, which is feature in Aberration. Yes, those will come up in the next episode." He says, "So my question would be: is it possible to separate the misinfo, secret, covert ops from the, if any, legitimate UFO claims?" And said, "Happy Thanksgiving." Happy Thanksgiving to you. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you out there. I know this will be coming out after Thanksgiving, but that's kind of what I found so intriguing about this entire topic. Really, was once you really start digging into it and the level to which this area, this realm has been infiltrated, you realize, Jesus Christ, there's like almost no telling fact from fiction. And even the stuff that may seem like fact has a lot of times been influenced by other fiction. So it has been psyop through and through. This is probably one of, if not the most thoroughly psyoped realms there is. And I, once again, another disclaimer: I'm not even trying to make the claim there aren't aliens or that they haven't visited us in the past. I always thought the ancient alien theory was always kind of cool. At the end of the day, like any claim coming out of there is borderline useless in my opinion at this point. So, I mean, I don't know what you do with that going from there. But it is an interesting thing to look into, and that's what we'll be getting into. Like I said, this will be a two-parter. I wanted to start off with, as I said, I'm pulling this from Aberration, so I'm basically straight up almost paraphrasing, pulling the same format. A lot of that stuff, but this is a testament to how good the book is. But I want to start off with, because I thought this was a good starting point, because for one, it just really interests me, the kind of the philosophies or religions undergirding a lot of the deep UFO stuff, and then also kind of a lot of the overlap between like the white power movement type stuff. Because if anyone knows, Aberrations kind of is a lot about OKC, kind of specifically. It's Aberration, Heartland, the Real, The Secret Lives, Timothy McVeigh. So it's specifically about McVeigh. But, obviously McVeigh, he kind of hung out with these right-wing, a lot of white power movement type individuals. So it's just kind of interesting to see this overlap, and both of which are very heavily infiltrated areas. So I think it's interesting to kind of look at what undergirds all of this. And to start off with, let's talk about in the 18th century, kind of where the philosophy starts off with. This is the Theosophical Society is what it's called, and this was founded by Helena Petrova. That's one name, Petrova Blavatsky, and she's kind of who started that. And the idea, the key point with this is it kind of ties into, you kind of see the overlap between race and like alien concepts, because they start making the ideas of like, different races and how we're almost borderline separate species. You can kind of start to see where the alien idea kind of starts to get interplay, and you'll see even more here. All right, with the Theosophical Society, and I don't have a deep understanding of this, people can go look into this deeper, but the way essentially it looks at the history of humanity as like a 7 root races, is what they call them, one for each continent, and represent different stages of human development. First comes from the moon. They appear on Earth in their ethereal form, so they don't even have a physical form. And then later, the Lemurians, who were the first to take human form, and having gender, all that stuff. And they're kind of supposed to represent South Asia and then also Black Africans by that lore. It goes also what happens with the Lemurians, which is an interesting point, because you can kind of see a lot of crossover between other actual existing religions as well. So with the Lemurians, they started mating with animals, creating a lower race of unintelligent mongrels, is how it's put in the book. And which has a lot of overlap with anyone who's familiar with the Nephilim, which, that's like Book of Enoch stuff. It's also some in Genesis too, I believe, which were like the race of giants who then bred with men. Well, not the race of giants. They were supposed to be angels, like fallen angels that bred with men, which then created giants, which I believe the giants were considered the Nephilim. And then, successive generations supposedly kept breeding with humans, and so on and so forth. So kind of demeaning themselves as being angels to kind of create these, abhorrent things, these monstrosities. So and you can kind of see the angle that people may take with that. Lemurians kind of breeding with lower race, and then obviously the implication being that these are the South Asia blacks. So like the idea being that like these are the descendants, implying that these are like kind of subhuman is kind of the implication by this. Or one way you could probably take it, because a lot of these probably have a lot of different interpretations, and not all of them necessarily have to be bad. I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know. I'm not like a deep theosophical guy, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is just through and through just the worst possible interpretation. But yes, and then who comes next? And then the Venetians, which were another race that supposedly came along. They were supposed to be in Egypt, ancient Egypt. They were the ones who, I guess, supposedly helped the Lemurians make Egypt, which that has a lot of crossover with a lot of ancient alien type theory stuff. The idea that like the aliens came down and helped out with that type thing. And then I guess for the Venetians, they were the ones who inhabited Atlantis. It sank to the ocean, so they kind of, sort of faded out from, being anything of note so far as a race. I mean, maybe some people might say some Venetians are around somewhere is maybe their understanding. I'm not sure. And because of that, a fifth race took over to kind of take the lead as like the head race, and that was the Aryans. That's very on the nose. People know what Aryans are about. And then later, I guess around the Victorian age, the Anglo-Saxons kind of took over. So I think it's pretty easy for people to see. And I want to emphasize that it's not necessarily saying that like with each successive race, they're supposedly superior to the other. But obviously, some people may say certain ones of them are superior to the other. It's kind of a little bit open to interpretation. And then according to Theosophy, there's a 6th and 7th root races, which they're supposed to be, coming along eventually, that they're slowly emerging. I guess sometimes there's different interpretations of how, whether it be divine intervention, which could be interpreted as like genetic manipulation or, aliens, stuff like that. Yes, and that's supposed to coincide with like an apocalypse whenever this comes around, almost like like a new cycle type thing, or another turning or whatever. So yeah, let me see what else did you. Oh, another key point with this is the Theosophy idea very much plays into the Nazis, which anyone who follows along with Fed stuff. Everyone knows Operation Paperclip, and they this kind of becomes this chicken egg thing, like, which it's almost like a circular thing of infiltration. You like a lot of the paperclip stuff, which obviously a lot of people follow that. There's a lot of Fed connections there with the paperclip stuff. They kind of got involved in other ones, so it's like you can kind of almost call that like a right wing sort of infiltration that then it kind of then comes to an alien, once to a right wing, then to an alien, and they just kind of all over the place. When you look at infiltration, they infiltrate all sorts of weird stuff. But yes. So you can kind of see how the roots with this concept, the Theosophy, you can kind of see loosely maybe how some of this might undergird some of the alien concepts. Yes, so like I said, with the Nazis, they were the ones who they were like a lot of people are aware of them, that they were associated with them. Like they were supposedly trying to, there's always rumors of the Nazis trying to make contact with aliens, or maybe they did make contact with aliens. There's all sorts of lore there. It's also interesting to note that this kind of gets at the point I was sort of alluding to with the the paperclip stuff with Nazis, Fed infiltration. And to be clear, I'm not making any assertions. I'm just saying you can kind of see the patterns there if you're someone who follows along with a lot of stuff. In the 1950s, the one of the founders of the kind of the contactee movement, kind of the initial, like a lot of the alien movement stuff, was founded by a white supremacist theosophist following the World War II. So you can kind of see that. This is also a lot of times these where you hear anyone's follow a lot of alien stuff, you'll hear things like Greys, Martians, Nordics, the different types of lizard people or whatever, all these different alien races. A lot of this, they kind of loosely ties in vibe-wise with the idea of like kind of the theosophy, all the different races, or maybe these are even possibly following subsequent the 6th and 7th root races. Yes. All right. So let's move on. Also, with the Aryan thing, a key point I'd like to bring up is that some of the lore with the like the Nazi stuff, the Aryans. So I mean, I guess it goes into Nazis or like the modern day neo-Nazi concepts. Is that some of them have this idea that there was some sort of shared heritage with the Aryans, the root race I was getting at earlier, with some of the aliens. So kind of somewhat alluding to their superiority because they come from some sort of advanced civilization. That's where their roots come from. So that might be some of the borderline underlying claims to their betterness. But yeah, and these things over time kind of morphed into other things. One of the other ones is later it became the Church Universal and Triumphant CUT, which is like a later, almost a direct descendant of Theosophy. And in this one, and this is where you can kind of see more alienish, more of the underlying, Nazi ideology, or maybe what's a different word than just using Nazi, because I feel like it's being lazy, racist or Nazi, but just the race superiority concept. And in this, I guess you would call it like a philosophy, religion, whatever. In this one, they believed that there was an ungodly counterfeit race of human automatons, which is kind of implied those are the Jews, and they walk around the earth, but because of their wickedness, they are destined for destruction. This group has had a lot of issues with the federal authorities, which I don't know. For me, I'm not necessarily saying that means there is any sort of infiltration, but it kind of makes me think there probably was. Whenever you have some sort of entity that has, having a lot of issues like that, they had weapons stockpiles, a lot of IRS stuff along those lines. It's also, little side note, McVeigh made a trip to there. Which anyone who's read Aberration, he made a trip to a lot of places and a lot of weird places. Part of why this portion's included in the book is because he kind of had a little weird foray into the UFO realm. So he was also kind of digging around with these individuals who kind of had this racist religion / philosophy / whatever you want to call it. And so he was kind of hanging out with these groups. And then these ones, this CUT group is very similar to Christian Identity, which is another kind of similar to theosophy type thing. And this is most notably is the residents of Elohim City were known for being practicers of this. I mean, it's a little bit of hodgepodge. Elohim City was kind of this right-wing, racist, white power movement. There was also religious stuff. It was supposed to be kind of like a sort of religious area, but not necessarily everyone was there. It was almost like a safe haven somewhat. But there were definitely religious figures there, and they were linked highly with Christian Identity, if not straight up Christian Identity. And with this one, this one's a fun one. All right, the idea with Christian Identity is, let me see how that essentially in the Bible, Eve created two separate bloodlines. One with her husband Adam, who was an Aryan according to this, and the other with the serpent. And this is what created to them the Jews, essentially. With Adam, obviously, this creates the Aryans, like I said, the humans, and according to this belief system, that those are the only real, legitimate humans, while the offsprings of Satan are, they walk around in human form, but they're actually demonic imposters on a mission to enslave and destroy the Aryans, or the descendants of Adam. And yeah, so those people, according to them, they call themselves Jews in order to trick everyone and to try to act as if they're the chosen people of God. Now, you may ask, okay, well, now we have Jews, we have the whites or the Aryans or whatever you want to call it, because I guess white's kind of open-ended. Now, what does that mean? What about all the other races? Well, according to them, this is where it gets a little bit weirder. The non-whites, non-Jews were other races that were essentially they called them mud people, which are the offspring of other creatures, that kind of descended during that period of time that came down, that they were like essentially children of Lucifer's other angels, the other fallen angels. So they were other children of fallen angels. So obviously now you're seeing more tie-ins with like Nephilim and other stuff. So those are the other races, and the idea with the other races, essentially, they're kind of, I guess you could almost say they're almost kind of stupid, subhuman, whatever. And in this idea, the Jews kind of, have taken these groups and essentially used them in their eternal mission against the whites. And yeah, with that, I'm trying to think if there's any other. Yes, I know this all sounds kooky, but this will make sense, I think, as you start to understand the interplay between these things. And I kind of have a point when I get to the end of the religion stuff that may make it a little bit more sense. But what else? Oh yes, also those the other races in this concept. They were almost like anyone who's familiar with Christianity knows the Garden of Eden, Adam, Eve. They were there, and according to that, God gave us dominion over all the animals, everything in there. And in that, these other races, the non-whites, non-Jews, were supposedly essentially included among that. So the idea is that essentially the whites, have dominion all over all races. But the evil Jews came and took them, have kind of taken them under their wing, and they have rebelled against us. And so essentially, it's us against everybody, the whites against everybody. I'm kind of interested to see if this will take it off YouTube, because I feel like it may at some points come off as if I'm trying to advocate for this. I'm not. I'm just explaining. Just clear that up for the YouTube censors. Just letting you know. So yes, there. This stuff is all silly. It comes off as very silly, which is kind of my point. And that's kind of the end of the religious stuff. I think that's important for people to understand that a lot of this, like, somewhat, and I'm not even trying to make the point that these are actually like prominent or large movements or anything, but they're there, and they tend to have a lot of interplay between the white power stuff. And I feel like, I know a lot of people, not everybody, I've kind of strayed away from libertarian theory a lot of times so far as like on coverage of my show. A lot of people know I am a libertarian, I'm an anarchist, whatever you want to call it. And when it comes to like economics, we talk about a lot of times, so there's distortions in the market and the government creates distortions. I think in some senses what we're seeing here with these things are distortions, because like I have a hard time even explaining these because they just sound so fucking silly. And I just struggle to believe. I mean, I'm sure there are people out here that take these ideas, they run with them, they think they're great. But for the most part, these sound really silly to me. And I think for most people, they sound really silly. So the idea that they have gotten any sort of note whatsoever sounds like a distortion to me. The same thing goes for like white power movements. I think that is part of it. The distortions in the market have created this, the infiltrations. And that's what we're going to get into now. All right, let me take a drink of water. Sorry, guys. I don't normally do solo episodes. These feel so weird. It feels like I'm talking to myself. It's so much better when I have a guest. But I got to flex these muscles. Got to work on it. And the more I do it, the better I'll get it, I guess. But, all right, let's get into it. All right. Boom, 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 boom. All right, in the mid to late 1940s, that's when the sightings started happening of the UFOs. And in 1947, that's when the U.S. Air Force created Project Sign to study the UFOs and determine if there was any threats, anything along those lines. And they determined in that they did not pose any sort of threat, but that UFO investigations should remain under the control of the military. And obviously the sightings continued, and then from there, and then from 1947, 1948, Project Sign became Project Grudge. But unlike Sign, they began with the position that the UFOs don't exist and the sightings were mass hallucinations. And because of that, this created almost made the public more suspicious. People weren't buying this nonsense, which I don't blame them. And then here, Oh yeah, the key point I wanted to bring up here too as well is that people they were worried that these might get into the ideas of advanced military aircraft and that maybe the Soviets can find out about it. So this is like the key point the government was, in their documents they were mentioning they were concerned about, that they were very concerned that these sort of things could be uncovered. And to grant some credence to the UFO individuals out there also could be that they had aliens or they had things along those lines, and they're also trying to skirt the eyes away from that. So these aren't mutually exclusive positions. So I know there might be some people out there like people are really into alien stuff, and as I mentioned before, I kind of somewhat am too. I'm open to these ideas. But just the point is that these aren't mutually exclusive. This can be occurring while they're also possibly doing these other things. All right, and then and then in 1951, Harry Truman, because the obviously, as I mentioned, they almost had like blowback from these continued denials. And from there, it just it built up this public tension to where they're like, what the heck is going on here? The government's lying to us. So in 1951, Harry Truman created the Psychological Strategy Board. And the purpose of this was to mess around with American culture, in general, all sorts of aspects of life, to promote the American way of life and neutralize documents hostile to foreign objectives. So this obviously played a part in messing around with UFO stuff. So this is kind of where they start really, and to be fair, they probably were to some extent prior, but this is where they really started like more semi-officially, messing around with the market, if you will. All right. By the time when it was created in 1951, the UFO sightings keeps going up, and to some extent, I would say this probably was because of the denial. This kind of increased somewhat of paranoia, so people were probably looking for it more. There probably also were false reports more often. So it's hard to tell to what extent there was more legitimate, but also there was during this period of time where there was a lot of stuff going on. So they probably were working a lot of experimental stuff as well. So it might be why there was more sightings there. All right. So in 1952, I thought this was interesting. The CIA director, Walter B. Smith, wrote to director Raymond Allen that he was transmitting to the National Security Council's a proposal in which it is concluded that the problems associated with unidentified flying objects appear to have implications for psychological warfare as well as intelligence operations. I suggest that we discuss at a board meeting the possible offensive, that's a key word I think people should pay attention to, and defense of utilization of these phenomena for psychological warfare purposes. And then in 1953, the CIA decides to create a panel to look into this. So they were using I think I accidentally skipped over the Blue Book. I totally forgot. From Project Grudge turned into Blue Book in 1952. And that's also where the military made the unauthorized release of UFO information a crime. Obviously, this applies, I would assume this only applies to people within the government because, how are you going to criminalize someone who just sees a UFO reporting it? But yes, within the government, this is when they made it illegal. So I accidentally skipped over something there, so just backing up a little bit. All right, 1953, the CIA creates a panel. And one of the people that heads this up is a scientist named Dr. Howard P. Robinson. He was one of the U.S. scientists who was kind of getting all the Nazi research at the close of World War II. So he's interacting with a lot of people. He also was a Caltech scientist, which anyone who's read Aberration knows why that's interesting. Caltech was kind of this private sort of group, but with government connections that kind of does a lot of spooky testing and stuff. There's a lot of lore there between. So yes, and there's ties into McVeigh. McVeigh worked there for a while. So worth mentioning that he was also a Caltech guy. And during this, they recommended that surveillance and close monitoring of UFO groups. which so we see how this is progressing throughout, how within the government, how this is kind of intensifying, and then obviously they somewhat create their problem as they go. They also one key point is they were trying to convince the public that one of the key points there is that this was natural phenomena. So then they were using mass media to accomplish this as well. So they were still dicking around with that, trying to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially, they were trying to pull the wool over the USA's or the United States eyes, the citizens of the United States, to get them to believe that this was just natural stuff that was happening. That this is all explainable. This is also around the time they started messing around and creating bogus disinfo. And kind of essentially trying to make people seem crazy. And yeah, it's to muddy the waters, creating noise, a surplus information, and bogus documentation, data shaf, I don't even know if that's the right way to pronounce that, known in the business as disinfo. So there's a period of time when they start doing these sorts of things. All right. And now let's kind of get into some of the things they were doing. and this is just kind of broad strokes. And then later, in the next episode, I'll provide more specific examples. In this, the UFO sighting, they started staging UFO sightings and encounters with extraterrestrials. The idea being is to study them. So they're literally creating these situations so they can study the citizenry to try to determine how they will react, who they'll tell, stuff along those lines. And then also, another thing they started doing is they started infiltrating a lot of these UFO groups that kind of sprouted up as a result of this pushback. They started infiltrating them using kind of Men in Black, is what might be the way that common culture might kind of understanding as, or commonly called Mirage Men within the parapolitics world. And essentially the idea being is they would find individuals within these UFO groups. They would I guess not necessarily pretend, because they actually were. They would a lot of times tell them they were government agents, maybe make up other lies as well, but it's pretty common they tell them they were government agents, they were on their side, whatever, and we're going to give you special info. And from there we're going to kind of a brain fart. And yes, and we're going to give you special info, so they're feeding them information to try to keep them going. And yes. Yeah, sorry. I'm a little scatterbrained. Still feel a little like shit. But anyways, so they would feed them this info, try to get kind of foster their this ideas, give them false info, try to keep sending them down these weird lines of inquiry or belief. And so that's what they do. And also on top of that, the feds were essentially funding movies and things that were portrayed themselves as non-fictional documentaries, and typically the idea being to take things, claims that were kind of weak and really essentially make mountains out of molehills. So say there was some farmer somewhere who made a report of seeing a light somewhere. The idea would be that the government would fund some group to make a non-fictional documentary or a movie, a fictionalized movie, to make it seem like it was this grand big thing. So the idea being is it kind of makes them seem like not a very credible realm. And, they kind of ran with these to kind of, throw people off. And this later led to, yeah. And the idea being here, they're like, this further discredits the movement by, kind of sending these people down this line, making them seem crazy. They discredit the movement to the eyes of the non-believers, quote unquote. But on the flip side, the individuals who are already inundated in this move, this just kind of drove them further and further into essentially a mania, into some people literally drove them crazy. And there are examples of this that we will get into in the following one. This led to, in 1960 and 1966, there were congressional hearings, and from that, we determined that the government determined, everything was on the up and up. The government's doing everything right. There's nothing wrong going on. And of course, all this did was fuel the UFO movement even further, created more fertile ground, and in turn made more fertile ground for the feds to infiltrate even further. Which, I mean, I know, before I learned a lot of this stuff, that was something that would be fresh in your mind. People would think about, or in my mind, you would see these videos of like the congressional hearings or this colonel or so and so with all these different stories, and you're like, oh my God, this is like literally in Congress they're talking about. It's like, oh my God, that's crazy. Which I think a lot of people are starting to see the light here now with the more recent stuff that's come out that's been a little bit, it's just been too on the nose. I think people are kind of, it didn't pass a sniff test for a lot of people. But the idea being that, like, yeah, we see those and we go, whoa, and you're kind of like, oh my God, maybe there is something there. And it kind of drives you. And I'm not saying there isn't something there. It's just saying that they're kind of creating this circus going on here to kind of, and that, which in the end, all it really does is kind of redirects energy away from where they want you to look. All right. And then later, after these hearings, the 1960 and 1966 hearings, the Air Force contracted with the University of Colorado to essentially create this entity that the public idea was to be an independent investigatory committee, to look into these things, to probably, to some extent, I would assume, to make it seem like, hey, we're the government and we're looking in these claims. We hear you, people. But really, in all reality, what they were doing is they were using this to discredit and debunk UFO people, and then also they were devising methods to further the craziness, essentially. Like I was kind of getting before, where to drive people crazy, or to just kind of make them seem not credible to the outside, to send these people down these crazy rabbit holes that have no real merit. But because people were starting from a false starting point with this disinfo they were being fed, it kind of drove them nuts. But yeah, that's all I have for this one. Sorry if that was a little bit manic. Like I said, I haven't been feeling so great. And I'm not used to doing solo episodes. Probably should slow down my talking a little bit. But I will get better at these as I go along. I'm gonna probably do a few, I don't know, maybe like 4, 5, 6 more of these ones. With an aberration. There's some ones that just kind of interested me, and I find it useful for me to be able to retain this information if I kind of do a presentation like this, even if it's not so great. But I don't know, you guys can be a judge of that. Let me know how, if you like these solo episodes. Either way, I'm going to keep doing them somewhat, occasionally here and there. I need to expand my arsenal of abilities. I can't only do conversation. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to, or any thoughts. Oh, I do want to guys give you a little bit of warning. Like I said, in the next episode, I'll be going to individual people, and I know a lot of you guys out there, especially in the OKC stuff or the alien stuff. You guys, there's a lot of Bill Cooper guys. I'm just gonna give you a warning right now. You may not like the next episode. Just saying. And I don't even know a ton about Bill Cooper. I just know from what I've read in here. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sounds like a kook to me. But I don't know. Whatever. You guys can let me know your thoughts now, and then also on the future one. Let me know why that's not the case or why it is the case. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, just because I'd like to learn more of them than just one. Because obviously this book was written by Wendy Painting, and so I'm sure she has her own thoughts about Cooper. I will say, from what she presented, it seemed like I don't really know how there's much of a decent argument for why he wasn't some crazy kook, but I don't know. Well, you guys let me know. Let me know if you think otherwise. But anyways, like I said, this is a No Way Jose show. You can find us on YouTube, all major odd pucketures, Rumble as well. You can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose if you want to send me this angry messages, knowing that I'm getting ready to probably say mean things about your buddy Bill Cooper or whatever. If you have any thoughts about these episodes, let me know. If you want to support me, patreon.com, NoWayJose2020. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Once again, apology to my patrons that I was a little slow on this one. I'll try to do a little better. My schedule's picking back up. Just in these holidays, I kind of threw it off, and the sickness made it even worse. But all right, guys, thank you. And that we are out.